Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some more injury updates, updated look at the playoffs as all the games have gone to Game 3, and some more off-season rumors involving the Colorado Avalanche, the Boston Bruins, and the New York Rangers, with all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. I'll kick things off today with a couple of signings that have happened over the last little while. First off with the Nashville Predators, they have signed two bottom six forwards to one-year cheap extensions, as both Michael McCarron and Kiefer Sherwood have signed one-year $775,000 deals to remain with the Nashville Predators. Then those extensions will kick in at the beginning of next season. Now for McCarron, he's been playing with the Preds for the last couple of years. Had a huge season a couple of years ago, putting up 7 goals and 14 points in 51 games. It looked like a really good, solid bottom six forward. I didn't get into as many games last year, was a little bit less productive, only getting into 32 games and putting up 2 goals and 4 points. But still, he looked like a really good 13th, 14th forward for the Predators. So getting him re-signed on a one-year deal, I don't think is too bad for the Predators. As it looks right now, he could definitely be challenging for like a fourth-line role next year. But if the Predators beef up their forward group a little bit in the offseason, I could see him maybe be like a spare forward for the Preds next year, or maybe even start in the minors. But it's just another good forward option for the Predators, and I really do like this signing for Nashville. As for Kiefer Sherwood, he signed a one-year deal last year to play with the Nashville Predators, coming off a pretty good season with the Colorado Avalanche, putting up a goal and 2 points in 11 games, but his real fantastic ability was in the AHL, where he put up 36 goals and 75 points in 37 games. It was a real force over in the AHL, so the Preds brought him in as sort of like an AHL forward to help out the AHL team, but he actually did quite well at the NHL level. He was able to put up 7 goals and 13 points in 32 games. Did get into some AHL games, putting up 22 goals and 38 points in 42 games, so he was also really productive at the AHL level. And he showed they can be a really good fourth line, maybe spare forward. So I like these two signings by Nashville. They get to keep a couple of good bottom six forwards for the next year, and with them only being on cheap deals, this doesn't really hurt them. So if those two can show they're still NHL forwards, they should be able to challenge for fourth line roles next year. If they're bumped down the depth charts a little bit, they should be really good AHL forwards. But either way, two really good signings there for Nashville. Another depth player who signed a one-year contract extension would be the Edmonton Oilers, signing Cam Dineen to a one-year $775,000 deal. He's been playing quite well over the past couple of years. Last year, he played his first NHL action with the Arizona Coyotes. He wound up putting up 7 assists in 34 games last year. At the AHL level, he also did pretty good, putting up 3 goals and 19 points in 21 games in the AHL. This year, he started off in the AHL with Arizona. After the deadline, he was moved to Edmonton and finished out the season in the AHL for Edmonton, so he didn't play any NHL games this year, but had a pretty productive AHL season this year, putting up 6 goals and 47 points in 69 games with the Oilers and Coyotes AHL affiliates combined. So he looks like a pretty good defender. If the Oilers move around some things and they need another depth defenseman next year, he could definitely be a good 7th defenseman, but it also wouldn't surprise me if the need probably start in the minors and continue to be a really good AHL defenseman. So, in my opinion, that's a really good signing for the Oilers to continue to have some really good depth on the defensive end, and Dineen might wind up playing some NHL games, but most likely he'll probably start in the AHL next year. And then a couple of entry-level contract signings here to talk about. First was the New Jersey Devils, as they have signed goalie prospect Tyler Brennan to a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $870,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year for the Devils. Now, Brennan was a 4th-round pick in this past year's draft, the 2022 draft, and he was probably one of the better goalies selected. He looks like a really good goalie. The Devils, as we've seen, already have Schmid in the NHL. Dawes looks like a really good prospect over in the minors, so they'll go add another prospect in Brennan. The future of their goalie department looks absolutely fantastic for the Devils. A lot of good young goaltenders. Brennan's been playing over the WHL over the past couple of years. Had a pretty good showing a couple of years ago, putting up a 3.58 goals against average and an .899 save percentage in 37 games. But this year was a lot better, putting up a 2.86 goals against average and an .898 save percentage in 37 games. So he looked really, really good this year. Definitely took some steps forward. He's probably going to need another year or two in juniors, and then maybe another year in minors. So he's not anywhere close to making the jump to the NHL right now, but it's another good goalie prospect for the Devils. He looks like he should be at least a maybe tandem goalie in the future, and I think getting him signed is the first step to getting him there. So good for the Devils to get him signed, and I expect Brennan to do really well. And lastly, here was the Vancouver Canucks. They have signed another Elias Pettersson. I know it's quite surprising, but same spelling, same everything. And they signed another Elias Pettersson, except this time it's defenders. They signed defenseman Elias Pettersson to a 3-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $870,000. And the deal will begin at the start of next season. Now, they took Elias Pettersson in the third round of this past year's draft. A lot of people were quite surprised that the Canucks now have 2 Elias Petterssons on their team. But the defensive Pettersson, who was drafted this past year, looks like a pretty solid prospect. Pettersson's been playing over in the SHL over the past couple of seasons. Had an assist in 17 SHL games last year. Played a lot more prominent role this year, getting a goal and 7 points in 43 games. So definitely looks really good. And I would expect Pettersson to continue to do well in the SHL. Probably needs another year over in Sweden, then maybe another year in the minors, so he's not anywhere near trying to challenge for a roster spot. But in time, I do think Pettersson could definitely be a good third pair defenseman for the Canucks, and I think Pettersson could definitely be a really good defender. So I think he has a future of maybe being a third, maybe second pair defenseman. And they've started that process of getting him to the NHL by getting him under his contract. So good to see Pettersson get his contract with Vancouver, and hopefully he can have some good success and get to the NHL just like the other Elias Pettersson in Vancouver did. So that's all the 5 signings. Good to see Pettersson get his entry-level contract for the Canucks. He should be a good defender in a couple of years. Good to see Brennan get his entry-level contract. In a few years' time, he should be a really good goaltender for the Devils. Good to see the Oilers sign Deneen. He should be a good depth forward next year for the Oilers. And then good to see the Preds sign McCarron and Sherwood, who should be good fourth-line forwards. But if the Predators do wind up getting some more players on the offensive side, maybe they'd be good depth forwards as well. But definitely, good signings all around for these 4 teams. Next, we'll go over to the playoff update part of the video. Since we last talked, each series has gone through Game 3 for the series. We'll get to all those games quickly here. First, on Thursday, we had a couple of games. We started with the Toronto Maple Leafs Florida Panthers series. The Leafs quickly, with a couple of goals, including one from Ryan O'Reilly, were able to get to a 2-0 lead quite quick within the first 6 minutes of the first period. Then the Panthers were able to get the score to within 1 with a goal midway through the first period. That's the way the first ended, 2-1 Toronto. They held the lead going to the second, but then 2 quick goals, including the leading goal by Alex Barkov in the first 70 seconds of the second period, flipped the script and allowed the Panthers to take a 3-2 lead really quickly. And as hard as the Leafs were trying to tie it, that's the way the score wound up going to the third period, and that's the way the score ended, as the Panthers were able to hold on after their 2 quick goals in the early part of the second period, take the game 3-2, and take the series lead 2-0. So the Panthers were able to come from behind after being down 2-0 early in the first, and they come away with a 3-2 victory. They go up 2-0 as the series heads back to Florida. Then we had the Stars and the Kraken play Games 2. It was a lot more of a dominant performance from the Stars after not having a really good performance in Game 1. Andre was brilliant. It was scoreless after 1. The Stars were able to get up to a 2-0 lead before the Kraken were able to get one on the board. Then they were able to get another goal before the second period ended to take a 3-1 lead into the second intermission. They would add a 4th goal earlier in the third to make it a 4-1, and that really put it out of reach. The Kraken were able to get a late one from Jordan Eberle, but it was too little too late, and thanks to Jake Ottinger and some good offensive production, the Dallas Stars were able to take Game 2 4-2, thus tying the series up at 1-1, heading back to Seattle for Game 3. Then on Friday we had one game, and that was the Devils and the Hurricanes. And the story was similar to what happened in Game 1 between these two teams. It was scoreless after 1. It looked like it was going to be a little bit closer than the Game 1 was. But then the Carolina Hurricanes opened the floodgates. They were able to score 4 goals, including the first 2 from Jesperi Kotkaniemi, to take a 4-0 lead after the second period. The Devils were able to get one early in the third to make it somewhat close and give them some hope. But then a couple of late goals in the third period by the Canes just put it out of reach. And the Carolina Hurricanes destroyed the New Jersey Devils 6-1. So once again, Schmid was pulled. It was not looking good for the Devils, and they were heading back to New Jersey in a 2-0 series hole. So not great news for Jersey. Carolina was playing absolutely brilliantly going into Game 3. Then on Saturday, we also had one game of action, and that was between the Oilers and the Golden Knights. And after losing their first game since March in regulation, the Oilers took that to heart. They absolutely came out and were firing on all cylinders against the Vegas Golden Knights. They were able to get up to a 4-0 lead in the first period, including a couple of goals from Leon Draisaitl, and then a shorthanded goal from McDavid and a power play goal from Bouchard. And it was just all Edmonton in the first period. It would carry on to the second. McDavid would get another goal. They would go up 5-0. The Knights did get one early in the third to cut the lead to 5-1, but that's the way the game would end, as the Oilers were able to take game 2 5-1 and send this one back to Edmonton in a 1-1 series. So really good game from the Oilers, good bounce back effort, and Draisaitl and McDavid continued to lead that team really, really well. So then we went to Sunday, where we had 3 Game 3s in action on Sunday. First was the Carolina Hurricanes New Jersey Devils, and it was a complete reversal of the script from Games 1 and 2. The Devils started Vanacek. They allowed Luke Hughes to play in his first NHL game, and boy did they look like a different team. They scored 3 goals in the first period, including this goal here, the first playoff goal for Timo Meier with the New Jersey Devils. They were able to go up 3-0 after 1, and then they continued to rock in the second period. They would score an early second period goal to go up 4-0. The Hurricanes would cut the lead to 4-1. The Devils were able to get another goal to make it 5-1. The Canes were able to score one before the end of the second period to make it a close 5-2 game. But then the Devils continued to push. They scored a couple of early goals in the third period to make it 7-2. The Carolina Hurricanes were surprised to get a couple of shorthanded goals to cut the lead to 7-4. But then another goal midway through the third period by Andre Palat sealed the deal as the Devils doubled up the Carolina Hurricanes 8-4 and took Game 3. Definitely that was a confidence booster for the Devils. Just like in the first series for them, they lost the first 2 games and were able to come back and win Game 3. And now that the series is only 2-1 Hurricanes, the Devils will be looking to tie the series in Game 4 tonight. Then we had the Florida Panthers and Toronto Maple Leafs play Game 3 later on Sunday. The Maple Leafs were able to get the early 1-0 lead. The Panthers wound up tying it. Midway through the second period, the Leafs were able to get the 2-1 lead. Just a huge lead for them, but then once again the Panthers tie it late in the second to make it a 2-2 game. That's the way the third period ended as well, 2-2. We went to overtime, and on this goal here by Sam Reinhart gave the Florida Panthers a 3-2 overtime victory, and surprisingly, the 3-0 lead over the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Panthers looked good. They were able to come back a couple of times. For the second straight game, they were able to come back after suffering a deficit to the Leafs. They were able to come back and win. And quite surprisingly, the Panthers are now a win away from their first conference final since 1996. So the Panthers win away. They can end this thing tomorrow against the Maple Leafs in Game 4. Then we had the Seattle Kraken face off against the Dallas Stars. 2 really good teams. Definitely played really well in Dallas. They go to the first game in Seattle, and it was pretty even after the first period, but then Seattle opened the floodgates. A couple of goals started by Eberle would lead to the Kraken having 4 goals in the span of 6 minutes and 12 seconds. So really quickly it turned from a scoreless game to a 4-0 Kraken lead. The Stars were able to get one back midway through the second to make it a 4-1 game. But then Tolvanen at the end of the second made it 5-1 Kraken. That's the way the score went into the intermission, 5-1 Seattle. Then Seattle would add another early goal in the third to make it 6-1. The Stars were able to get one midway through the third to make it a 6-2. And then the Kraken would later get a power play goal at the end of the game to make it 7-2. And that's the way the game ended, as the Kraken were able to take Game 3 on home ice over the Dallas Stars, 7-2. And they will be looking for a 3-1 series lead later tonight against the Dallas Stars and take the stranglehold on the series going back to Dallas for Game 5. So definitely Seattle's looked really good. Their goaltending has been okay. They've been able to solve Onger quite a bit in the playoffs, so Seattle looks good right now. Dallas is going to be looking to tie up the series later today. And then finally, last night, we had one game again. That was the Golden Knights and the Edmonton Oilers. Complete reversal of the first game. Oilers were able to score a quick one in the first couple of minutes to get them a 1-0 lead. And then after that, the Golden Knights were able to get a couple of goals from Jonathan Marchessault before the period end to give the Knights a 2-1 lead. And then they were able to score a hat-trick of goals in the second period, including one from Stevenson and Eichel to give the Golden Knights a 5-1 lead over the Oilers. and there was no score in the third, so that's the way the game ended. As the Knights were able to take Game 3 over the Oilers 5-1, and they were able to take the 2-1 series lead, now going into Game 4 against the Oilers tomorrow. So, as it sits right now, the Panthers are up 3-0 on the Leafs, with a chance to end the series tomorrow against Toronto, and a chance to sweep the Maple Leafs in the second round, and go to their first conference final since 1996. Meanwhile, the other three series are all 2-1. The Carolina Hurricanes have a 2-1 lead on Jersey. They play Game 4 tonight. The Kraken have a 2-1 lead over the Dallas Stars. They play Game 4 tonight. And then the Golden Knights have a 2-1 series lead over the Edmonton Oilers. They play Game 4 tomorrow night. So definitely a lot of close series. Well, these series are all really close, and they haven't really been too far apart. There's actually been quite a bit of blowouts in the second round. I mean, you got like 7-2 Kraken, 8-4 Devils, 6-1 Hurricanes, 5-1 Oilers, 5-1 Knights. So while these teams are really close and are playing back and forth, they're winning these games in blowouts. So I think the Leafs and the Panthers have really been the only series that has been consistently close, as the other series have definitely had at least one, if not a couple, blowouts up to this point in this series. But definitely a lot of high-scoring affairs, and I can't wait to see how Game 4s go for all these teams over the next couple of days. And next we'll go over to the injury update part of the video. Just a couple of quick injury updates here, not too many to discuss today, but just a couple here. First with Toronto Maple Leafs. Matthew Knies suffered a concussion during Game 2, left the game, did not return, also didn't play during Game 3 for the Maple Leafs, and it has also been ruled out for tomorrow's game against the Florida Panthers. So not great news. Knies was a huge part of the Toronto-Tampa series. When Toronto put him into the lineup, he actually did quite well. So losing him for the next few games is not great, especially with the Leafs facing elimination tomorrow. On top of that, goalie Ilya Samsonov suffered an undisclosed injury during Game 3, left the game. The Maple Leafs were forced to put in Joseph Woll. Woll did all right, but he did end up getting the loss in Game 3 for the Leafs. And it's going to be interesting to see if Samsonov is going to be ready to go for tomorrow. Samsonov definitely left the game, did not return, did not look good. So hopefully Samsonov's ready for tomorrow, but it's possible he could not be ready for tomorrow. So definitely going to be something interesting to see. Then over with the Seattle-Dallas series, Daniel Sprong left Game 3 for the Seattle Kraken due to an undisclosed injury. Just not great news for the Kraken. Sprong's a really good forward, so to lose him for any significant period of time is not great. Hopefully his injury is not overly long period of time. As for the Dallas Stars, I'm going to show you a clip here. Remember, all clips are credited to Sportsnet. But in this clip here, Seattle took a point shot. That point shot went off of Miro Heiskanen's face. The puck wound up going to the crease and leading to Jordan Eberle's goal that opened the scoring in Game 3. But on this play, Heiskanen took the puck to the face, did not look good. Heiskanen left the game, did not return due to the injury. So hopefully Heiskanen can go for tonight's game against the Kraken. Hopefully he's not going to be out for an overly long period of time, but that didn't look good for Heiskanen. And hopefully he's ready to go for the Dallas Stars, as he's a really big piece of that group. So hopefully he's not going to be out for an overly long period of time, and he can go for tonight's game. And hopefully he's not affected a lot by this injury. Then over with the Vegas Golden Knights last night in their game against the Edmonton Oilers in their win. They did lose Laurent Brossoit due to a lower body injury. Aiden Hill had to come in and help the Golden Knights end that game. Brossoit's played in all of the Golden Knights games previously, helping them so far be 6-2 in the playoffs, helped them win in the 5-game series against the Jets, and helped them in the first couple of games against the Oilers. So not great news to see Brossoit go down. The Knights do have some really good goalie depth with guys like Hill and Quick and Thompson. So if Brossoit is not ready to go, they do have some other guys that they can replace. But I think Brossoit has been the best Golden Knights goalie over the past couple of weeks. So hopefully he's not out for an overly long period of time and he can get back into game action in Game 4 tomorrow. Then you have Ryan Graves, who suffered an undisclosed injury in Game 2, left the game, did not return to Game 2 against the Hurricanes, and did not play in Game 3 for the Devils. So Graves is a really good top four defenseman. The main reason Luke Hughes was put in was because Graves was not going to be playing. So just not great news for the Devils to lose really key top four defenseman in Graves. They're able to win without him in Game 3, but hopefully he's not out for an overly long period of time, and he can get back maybe even in Game 4 tonight against the Hurricanes. So definitely going to be interesting to see. And lastly here with Matthias Janmark in Edmonton. He missed both Games 2 and 3 due to a undisclosed injury and is currently day-to-day. So hopefully Janmark can return in the not-too-distant future. He did miss a couple of games against the LA Kings due to an injury, so hopefully it's not another reoccurring injury and he can be back in the next little while, as he's a really good bottom six forward for the Edmonton Oilers. So hopefully he's not out for too long. And then on the other side of the injury spectrum, guys who were able to come back from injuries, there wasn't too many. Timo Meier, who suffered an undisclosed injury, was able to return to game action in Game 2 and Game 3 for the New Jersey Devils, and was able to get back and help the Devils. He was a really key piece in the Devils winning Game 3 and pushing this series to 2-1 Carolina. So good to see him get back. He's a really good top six forward, even though he didn't do really well in the first series. Good to see him get on the score sheet in Game 3, and hopefully he can continue to help Jersey possibly tie this series up in Game 4 tonight. And then just a couple of other players who are on teams who are not in the playoffs who are activated to play. Nick Bonino, who missed the last couple of weeks of the regular season while the Penguins were in the playoff race due to an injury, has now been cleared to play. So he's definitely going to be ready for next year, I would guess. So good to see Pittsburgh get Bonino back, and he's going to be a pending unrestricted free agent. So wherever he signs, he should be ready to go for next year. And then Buffalo Sabres prospect Oliver Nadeau has been cleared to play as well. So Nadeau's a really good prospect, but he's probably still going to play another year in juniors or maybe a year in minors. So not a really good NHL player right now, but Nadeau does seem like he has an NHL future. So hopefully Nadeau can get into game action in the not-too-distant future at some level of the game for the Sabres. But that's all the injury updates I want to get to today. And finally here, we'll go over to the off-season rumor part of the video. Now, we'll start with the New York Rangers. All three of these teams were the last three eliminated in the first round. So for the Rangers, they had a pretty good season this year. They finished third in a really competitive Metro division, just below the New Jersey Devils. In the first round, they were able to get a 2-0 series lead against the Devils. They gave up 3 straight games, went down 3-2 to the Devils, were able to take Game 6, but then wound up losing in a pivotal Game 7 against New Jersey. They could not solve Akira Schmidt after he came in the third game, and their offense dried up. So what can they do in the offseason to improve this team? If you look at this team, in goal, you still have Igor Shesterkin signed for a reasonable $5.6 million cap for the next 2 seasons. So you still got a really elite level starting goaltender at not too bad of a cap hit. They do have Yaroslav Halak, who was their backup last year, being an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So they're going to need to try and find a solid backup for Shesterkin after this year. I do think they could probably try and look either via free agency or via trade, but I do think they're going to try and find a backup for Shesterkin. On the defensive end, I don't really see much changing for that team. They still have Braden Schneider signed. They still have Jacob Trouba signed. They still have Adam Fox signed. Ryan Lindgren still signed for another year, so they're pretty good on the defensive end. The one big problem for the Rangers is they are going to need to sign Keandre Miller to a new contract extension. He is a restricted free agent, but he's going to need probably, my guess would be somewhere between a 3 to 6 year deal at a cap hit of around $4 to $6 million. So it's going to be a decent amount of money to get Keandre Miller signed, but given how well he's played, given what he brings to the table, I think it's definitely worth it for the Rangers if they can go and bring in one of those guys. Then maybe they try and bring in another third pair of defensemen to maybe play as Braden Schneider. I know that Mikkola did really well this year after being acquired from the St. Louis Blues, but I do wonder if bringing someone in free agency on like a 2-year deal who can maybe play with Schneider on the third pair, I think that would be a really good fit for the Rangers. As for the forward group, I know there have been people who have saying Panarin should be traded because he did not do very well. In my opinion, I don't think they should do that. Panarin's still an elite level forward, and not only is he a really good point producer and really good, he just didn't show up in the playoffs, but I don't really see many teams taking on an $11.6 million cap hit, at least until next year when the cap goes up a little bit more instead of just like a $1 or possibly $2 million increase this year. So, in my opinion, I don't see Panarin being moved. I see them keeping Panarin at least for this year. I see them keeping Zibanejad, Trocheck, Kreider, Kako probably as well, Hedl on the forward group. The one guy I do wonder about is Alexis Lafreniere. He's a really good forward. I think he still has some really good star potential in him, but it just hasn't really found it yet. And if the Rangers don't see him being a key top 6 piece of the future right now, Lafreniere needs a new extension. If they don't feel that he's going to be a key top 6 piece going forward, then I think they have to at least consider trading him. Lafreniere was the first overall pick from a couple of years ago, but he's stuck on that third line right now for the Rangers, stuck behind guys like Kreider and Panarin, and I do really wonder if maybe a fresh start for Lafreniere is the best thing. But I also think that's possible that with the Rangers needing a new coach, maybe they bring in a new coach, maybe Lafreniere's rejuvenated. It's possible that he stays as well. So definitely interested to see. But if they do keep Lafreniere, he's going to need an extension. And if they don't feel Lafreniere has a future as a top 6 winger in New York, then I think they could possibly try and work out a trade. As for the other guys on the forward group, they could try and rework their bottom 6. I know that they have VC for a couple more years now on his new extension, so maybe they try and bring up a guy like Brennan Othmann. I think could be a good third line forward for the Rangers next year. Othmann looks like a really good forward, so maybe putting Othmann on the third line with Hedl next year would be a really good addition. I think that would be possibly a really good addition on the forward group for the Rangers. I could see maybe try and add some more physicality on the fourth line. They did lose a little bit of physicality when they traded Reeves to Minnesota, but I do think that they could definitely try and replace him in the offseason with a couple of hard-hitting guys who can play on the fourth line. If they're looking for some cap space, maybe to sign Lafreniere. I do wonder if maybe a guy like Barclay Goodrow could be traded. He is currently making $3.6 million for the next 4 years. So with him being stuck on the fourth line, I do wonder if the Rangers maybe try and move him to another team. And lastly, I do think they need to try and add on that right side. They didn't really do well with Kane Tarasenko in the playoffs. So maybe they bring one of those guys back. Maybe they try and go after someone else in free agency, but I think they do need someone who can play consistent top 6 minutes and is a natural right winger. In my opinion, if they can add a natural right winger, maybe move Goodrow, maybe consider moving Lafreniere, or if they do want to keep him and view him as a top 6 forward in the future, then try and get him signed to an extension and maybe rework that fourth line. And if they can do that, I think the Rangers can still be a really good team. So, in my opinion, Rangers need a backup goalie who can play behind Shesterkin. Rangers could probably use a good third pair defenseman to play with Schneider. And they definitely need an extension for Condre Miller. And on the forward group, don't trade Panarin. He's a really good forward. Keep him on the top 6. If you see Lafreniere as a future top 6er, then keep him in the top 6. Try and extend him. If they see him being more of a third line bottom 6 forward, then you have to consider trading him for a good package that you can get in return. Give Othmann a chance on the forward group and maybe rework that fourth line. Maybe move Goodrow if they need some more cap space, and maybe bring in a couple more physical bottom 6 forwards. And I think this team could definitely be challenging for the Metro League again next year and should definitely be a playoff team. Over with the Colorado Avalanche, they had some awful news earlier today. Gabriel Landeskog is going to miss the rest of next season due to his injury that kept him out of this year. So not great news. He's going to be out due to his knee injury for the next year. So not great news. He's probably going to miss the entirety of the 23-2024 season. So that's not great. But without Landeskog this year, the Avalanche actually did quite well. They had a lot of injuries. There was a lot of times when they didn't look the best. Did not look like the Stanley Cup contender they were last year. They wound up pushing harder in the second half of the season. Definitely made a strong second half push. Were able to narrowly edge out the Dallas Stars for the top end spot in the Central. Got the Seattle Kraken in the first round. And although losing game 1 in the series, they went up 2-1 in the series. Then they went down 3-2 in the series. They were able to tie the series at 3-3. And in a pivotal game 7, they wound up losing to the Seattle Kraken. So it's quite surprising, but Colorado was bounced out of the first round, and now they have an off-season where they need to try and rework some things. So in that, I don't see any changes happening. They were really good this year, won the Central Division with Georgiev and Francouz. Georgiev did not have any playoff experience going into this year, so getting him some playoff experience earlier this year was a really good thing for the Avalanche, and I think running back with Georgiev and Francouz next year will be a smart thing to do for the Avalanche, so I don't expect much changes in the net. As for the Avalanche's defense, you still have a really solid top 4 of Taves, Makar, Byram, and Manson. Byram's going to need a contract extension, so I'll expect that to be a top priority for the Avalanche in the offseason. On the third pair, I do think they could have a couple of different guys. Eric Johnson's contract is going to be expiring in the offseason, so that gets $6 million off the cap. I do wonder if they try and bring him back on a very cheap, maybe 1 or 2 year deal for the Avalanche. I also wonder, could McDermott be a really good third pair defenseman? I think they could also try and go out and maybe acquire a third pair defenseman or two. But one player I could see them trying to trade to maybe increase some cap space or get some more help on the forward group will be Sam Girard. Really good puck-moving defenseman. Has still, I think, 4 or 5 years left at $5 million, so a reasonable cap hit for an offensive producer. But he's definitely dealt with his fair share of injuries over the past year. And with the team lacking a bit on the forward group, I think moving him to possibly maybe upgrade on the forward side would definitely help the team. So I would say Sam Girard is probably a guy to watch out for to possibly be traded. And as for the forward group, I think they need to rework that. I think that's the priority number one in the offseason. They still have guys like McKinnon, Rantanen, Nichushkin, Lehkonen in the forward group, so those are really good top six forwards. I think Newhook in time could definitely be a second line center, but at this current point in time, I think he's more of a third line center, so he's going to need a new extension as well, so they're going to need to have some money to sign him. But with Landeskog now being out, they're going to be lacking a couple of really big pieces. The bottom six on that team is not great as well. Guys like Lars Eller, Cogliano, Helm, Nieto are all going to be UFAs at the end of the year, so I definitely think they could try and add maybe one or two top nine wingers and maybe a couple of bottom six forwards who could play on the fourth line. They also have a couple of young guys like a Ben Meyers or a Sampo Ranta who I think could get NHL minutes next year. But I think the big problems on that team will be second line center and another top six winger. With Landeskog most likely missing next year now, they're going to need another winger who can play top six minutes. I think they could definitely go and try and get a guy like maybe Tarasenko or Kane if he's available as well, or someone else via free agency. So I definitely think there's a couple of options there for the Avalanche. There's a couple of centers who could be available in the offseason, especially via trade. So I do wonder if the Avalanche try and swing a deal to get a second line center who can play behind McKinnon next year. I think losing Kadri and not really replacing him in the offseason last year was a huge reason as to why the Avalanche just didn't have that next level of energy this year like they did last year when they won the Cup. So I definitely think they could benefit from having a second line center, and if they have to maybe move Sam Girard to get a top line winger or a second line center, I think they'll be willing to do that. So in my opinion, for the Avalanche, keep their tandem of Georgiev and Francouz. That's a really good tandem. On the defensive end, keep the top four intact. Try and sign Byram on a new deal. Get a new third pair defenseman who can play third pair minutes. Consider trying to sign Eric Johnson, who's a really good third pair defenseman who's going to be a pending UFA. Maybe Curtis McDermott goes on that third pair. And then consider trading Sam Girard if it helps to improve that forward group. And then on the forward group, you have Newhook as your third line center. You can have a guy like Ben Meyers, maybe Logan O'Connor in the bottom six as well. So they're definitely going to need maybe a couple of bottom six forwards. Maybe try and bring back a guy like Helmut Cogliano. But I think they're definitely going to be a team who's looking for some bottom six forwards in free agency. And then with Landeskog now out, try and bring in a second line center and a top six winger who can help replace the loss of Landeskog. I think if they can do that, they have a top six winger, a second line center, a little bit more productive bottom six, still a really good defensive core. I think the Avalanche could once again be challenging for the Central Division title and could be one of the stronger teams in next year's playoffs. So I definitely think that the Avalanche should definitely be really good next year. And if they can do these sorts of things, I think the Avalanche should definitely be another scary team to face up against in next year's season. And lastly, here with the Boston Bruins. They got the shock of the century. After putting up the best season, the most wins in NHL history, the most points in NHL history, getting the President's Trophy, going and winning the conference, the league, after running it back with a lot of their older veterans like Bergeron and Krejci coming back, they wound up facing the Florida Panthers in round one. They were able to get a 1-0 series lead. After the Panthers were able to tie it, they got a 3-1 series lead, and they choked that series lead and lost 4-3 in 7 games, and lost the 7th game in overtime. So it was close, but the Bruins were not able to finish the series off, and now they are looking at a ton of questions going into the offseason. So what are they going to do? I've seen some people say that the Bruins might trade Ullmark to try and free up some cap space. I don't see that. Ullmark's a really good Vezina-level goaltender. He was playing hurt in the playoffs, so I don't think we can really pin the Bruins series loss on him. He's still a really good goaltender. Jeremy Swayman does need a new contract extension, so that could be a bit costly. I could see him get something maybe similar to what Spencer Knight had, maybe a little bit more, sort of like a 3-year bridge deal at $4.5 million, maybe closer to 5. But that's sort of the type of deal I'm seeing Swayman get for Boston, so they're definitely going to need some more cap space to try and make that work. So if you look at the goaltending core, I don't see much movement. I still think they'll run it back with the Swayman-Ullmark tandem next year. On the defensive end, they still have a guy like McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, who I don't think will be moved next year. Those are 3 really good top 4 defensemen. Dmitry Orlov fit in extremely well with the Boston Bruins. It would not surprise me at all if the Bruins tried to bring him back on some sort of a deal before he tests free agency. They still have a couple of good third pair defensemen like a Derek Forbort or a Jacob Zboril. So I do think they're really good set in that sense. I do think there's a couple of trade options for them there. One will be Mike Riley. He's making $3 million for 1 more year, spent the majority of the season in the minors, and is still a really good third-pair defenseman, but just got boxed out of that Bruins lineup. So I do wonder if he maybe gets a fresh start somewhere else. And then another guy would be Matt Grzelcyk. Grzelcyk was in and out of the lineup towards the end of the season. As after Orlov came in, Forbort was playing well, there was not really any room for Grzelcyk, so with him only being a year away from unrestricted free agency and making $3.6 million, I do think he could be a definite trade chip for the Boston Bruins and maybe be moved to help them improve in another area. So I think guys like Grzelcyk and Riley are possible trade chips. Maybe bring back Orlov. If they don't bring back Orlov, maybe bring in another guy who can fit on their top 4, but I think the Bruins will have a little bit of change on the defensive end. But the forward group is going to be the spot where they need the most change. They re-signed David Pastrnak, they re-signed Pavel Zacha, so those two are signed for longer-term deals. They still have Marchand on their contract, they still have Coyle on the contract, so I expect those guys to be back next year. But you have a lot of players being UFAs. Tyler Bertuzzi, who was acquired at deadline, so was Garnet Hathaway, both UFAs. Top 2 centers, Bergeron and Krejci, are both UFAs. There's a lot of talk they both could retire after this year, so that's going to be interesting to watch. Both are 37 years old. Another one will be Nick Foligno, whose contract comes off the books. So there's a lot of possibilities with the Boston Bruins. I think for them, they could also consider trading DeBrusk or Hall. Hall's going to have 2 years left at $6 million, and after the addition of Bertuzzi, was sort of stuck on the third line. So I think to free up some cap space and maybe bring back Bertuzzi, the Bruins could try and move Hall. Another guy would be Jake DeBrusk. We know he had trade requests, and there was a lot of trade rumors that was surrounding him a couple of years ago. I do wonder with him entering the final year, if his deal at $4 million, if he's a possible trade candidate to try and free up some cap space as well. So I'll definitely keep my eye out on Hall and DeBrusk. I think at least one, maybe both of them, could wind up being traded by the Bruins in the offseason. And finally, with that, bottom 6 is going to need to be reworked. I think they could definitely bring back a guy like Hathaway. They still have a guy like Lauko, Greer. I do think they have a couple of prospects like Beecher and Lysell who should be NHL forwards next year. But in my opinion, the entire Bruins team really depends on will Bergeron or Krejci be back. If they lose one or both of their top 2 centers, they're going to need to try and find someone to replace them. There's a couple of centers on the trade market who I think could fit well in Boston, but I don't think they're at the level of losing a guy like Patrice Bergeron. So, in my opinion, if Bergeron's gone, that's a huge blow to the Boston Bruins if he retires. If he's back for next year, maybe David Krejci too, I think that team could definitely be really good again next year. So in my opinion, I think they keep Mark Swayman to try and find a way to get Swayman under contract. They keep McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo as their top 3 of the top 4. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to bring back Orlov as another top 4 defenseman. On top of that, I do wonder if they maybe move a guy like Mike Riley, who has $3 million left on this contract for 1 more year and could definitely be a good third-pair defenseman elsewhere. Matt Grzelcyk, who didn't have too much playing time towards the end of the season, still a really good top 4 defenseman. I think with him entering the final year of his deal, he could be traded to help improve that maybe forward group. And on the forward group, they still have a really good top 6 with guys like Zacha, Pastrnak, Marchand. Throw in Fabian Lysell and John Beecher into the mix for next year. They still have a guy like Charlie Coyle. Maybe they move one of Hall or DeBrusk to try and free up some cap space. Keep one in their top 6. Maybe to try and bring back Tyler Bertuzzi. I could see him try and get some more top 9 wingers. I could see him try and rework that 4th line. They still have a couple of guys like Lauko. I could see Hathaway back. But I think the priority number 1 for the Boston Bruins will be, will Bergeron and or Krejci be back next year? Or will they have to try and look for a center elsewhere to try and improve the team for next year? So that's definitely something interesting to see. Will the Bruins need a couple of new centers next year? Or will they be able to run it back with some of their older guys in Bergeron and Krejci? But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Definitely like to hear what you think down in the comments. Does Bergeron or Krejci return for Boston? Do they have enough cap space to maybe bring back a guy like Bertuzzi or Orlov? And if they don't, which guys would you trade to try and bring back Orlov and Bertuzzi? If you're the Rangers, I don't think they should trade Panarin, but let me know down in the comments, do you think they should trade Panarin or Lafreniere if they're the Rangers? And if you trade those two, who are you bringing in to maybe work in that top 6? And if you're the Avalanche, now that you know Landeskog's out for next year, they need a top 6 winger, they need a second-line center. I'd like to know who you think in the comments section the Avalanche should be bringing in the offseason to replace a guy like Landeskog and try and bring in a second-line center to help that team competitive for next year. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I have a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.